The alien fleet hovered at the edge of Earth's orbit, their colossal warships casting ominous shadows across the blue planet below. The Council had been watching for days, mocking, laughing, underestimating the humans. They thought their signal, a burst of strange, seemingly unintelligible data, was a plea for help, a primitive signal from a dying species. They were wrong. "We've got nothing," the commander said, his voice a low rasp as he stared at the unblinking lights on his console. The signal, once a cacophony of disjointed frequencies, had resolved into one persistent, unyielding tone, a signal that made no sense. The Council had dismissed Earth's silence as a sign of weakness. The humans were nothing more than a footnote in the galactic ledger. The thought of a species sending such a primitive, desperate message amused the Council at first. They were sure the Earth's technology was no match for their empire's vast war machine. After all, they were the pinnacle of civilization, controlling the stars with ease. And Earth. Earth was nothing but a small, insignificant speck. The commander's fingers hovered over the console, the tension in his hand palpable. The tone on the screen was maddeningly repetitive, the signal too clean to be random. Something was hidden in it, something that eluded their analysis. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Council had sent them to study, to scout, but they hadn't been prepared for this. He turned to the alien at his side, an aide standing in rigid silence, watching the data unfold. "What do you make of it?" The aide hesitated, his sharp, multifaceted eyes reflecting a flicker of doubt. "The signal, it's too deliberate, it's almost deliberate." A chill ran through the commander's spine. "Too deliberate?" His voice was a low growl. "What do you mean?" "There's order to it, but no pattern we can understand. It's as if it's waiting for something, responding, but there's no other signal coming from them. Just this silence." The commander clenched his fist. The silence that had come from Earth, the very silence the Empire had come to expect, was now distorted. The faint hum of the signal reminded him of something ancient, something he couldn't quite place, something human. "They must know something we don't," the aide added, his voice laced with an uncomfortable tone. "They've stopped hiding." The commander's face contorted. "Don't be ridiculous. They are silent. They've always been silent. The Earth is just another primitive species." The aide hesitated before speaking again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think they might be waiting for us." The commander's eyes narrowed. Waiting for them? The thought hadn't crossed his mind. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was a message, and that message wasn't for help. It was for them. The console blinked, suddenly flashing a bright red as the ship's systems registered a new anomaly, a disturbance in their ship's hull. The commander immediately ordered the alert system to track the source. Nothing appeared. On their radar, nothing visible. But the hum, that endless, maddening hum, seemed to be growing louder. He spun to his second-in-command. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know. It's like it's coming from within us," the officer replied, confusion thick in his voice. This hum, it's vibrating through our entire fleet." "What's causing it?" The officer's screen flickered, and the hum suddenly changed pitch, growing more insistent, like a call to attention from the void itself. The commander felt his gut churn. "There's nothing out there," the officer said, his voice trembling. But there was something far more dangerous than they could have anticipated. Without warning, the fleet's sensors began to flash erratically. A distortion, a ripple in space, the kind that had only been theorized, a fluctuation in the space-time continuum. The commander's heart skipped a beat. "No," he muttered, eyes wide. "It's impossible." Then the fleet went dead silent. No hum, no vibration, no distortion. The stars, once gleaming bright, disappeared in an instant. Earth had responded, but not in any way the Council had ever imagined. On the view screens, nothing but a blinding light filled the space where Earth had once been. An intense, pure white light, brighter than any sun. The fleet had never encountered anything like it. The commander's mouth went dry. He couldn't breathe. His ship seemed to shrink under the sheer weight of the brightness. And just as soon as it had come, it was gone, vanished, as though the planet itself had never existed. It took moments for anyone to speak. "Commander," the officer whispered, "what just happened?" The commander's eyes were fixed on the empty space where Earth had been. His mind raced, calculating, wondering. Was this some sort of advanced weapon? Was it a trap? They'd been expecting a primitive, broken race. Not this, whatever it was beyond anything they had ever seen. They had underestimated them, but now, as the last remnants of the light faded, they were beginning to realize just how grave their error had been. The silence that followed seemed to echo louder than the light itself. The commander stared into the void, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Prepare to fire," he ordered, his voice shaking with a sudden fear he hadn't known he could feel. "Fire on the last known coordinates of Earth, now!" The fleet hesitated, a momentary pause in the chain of command. They had been so sure, so certain of their superiority. The universe was theirs to control, but now, for the first time, the commander felt doubt. A creeping, suffocating doubt. The officer at the console looked at him. But what if it was a message? "A message?" the commander spat, his voice rising in anger. "A message from a species that is gone? No, they've gone silent before. This time, though, we are the ones who should be afraid." The officer nodded, his hands shaking as he obeyed the command. A cold dread settled over the ship as the fleet powered up its weapons, but something more profound lingered in the pit of the commander's stomach. The light had vanished, but the dread remained. And that, the commander whispered, his voice a hollow echo, was before Earth even responded. The fleet moved into position, their weapons primed and ready, but there was an odd stillness that hung over the commanders and officers on board. A moment of hesitation, as if the stars themselves had swallowed their resolve. No one spoke, but their eyes flickered toward the void where Earth had once been. There was something unsettling about the silence that had taken its place, a silence that felt like it was waiting for them. The commander paced in the dim light of the bridge, his boots clicking against the metal floor. He had ordered the fleet into formation, expecting to find what the Council had been so certain of, an ancient, dying world, ripe for conquest. But instead, they had encountered nothing, and yet everything. The light had been overwhelming, almost too much to comprehend, and now the emptiness that followed felt like an insidious presence, lurking just beyond the edge of their vision. The first officer, a tall figure with sharp features, turned to the commander, his voice low but heavy with the weight of the situation. "Sir, should we not try to analyze the data further? We've barely scratched the surface." The commander's brow furrowed. "Analyze what? There's nothing left to analyze. Earth is gone. Whatever we just saw, it wasn't a weapon, it wasn't an attack, it was something else." The first officer swallowed, his eyes flicking nervously to the empty space on the view screen. "Then what are we dealing with?" The commander's voice dropped to a whisper, the words escaping with a sense of dread he hadn't anticipated. "I don't know, but it's not what we expected." He turned to the helmsman, a young alien who had been with the fleet for years. "Continue scanning the area. If there's anything left of that planet, I want to know about it. Now." The young officer nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, of fear, as if he too knew that something wasn't right. He began tapping away at his console, but the readings remained the same. Silence. Void. The hum from earlier had vanished, but it was replaced by a deeper, more oppressive quiet. "How long have we been in this sector?" the commander asked suddenly, his tone cutting through the tension like a blade. 2 hours, the first officer replied. Since the light disappeared, the commander's eyes narrowed. 2 hours, and we haven't moved an inch, sir? I want every ship on high alert. We're not leaving here until we understand exactly what happened. A murmur rippled through the crew. They had never encountered a situation like this. An entire planet vanishing, as if it had never been there at all. The technology of the Empire was vast and powerful, but even they had no framework for understanding what had just occurred. For the first time, doubt began to gnaw at the edges of the commander's mind. They had been so sure, so confident, that they could wipe out Earth in an instant. Their ships were advanced, their weaponry unmatched. Earth was supposed to be a simple target, easily crushed under their might. But now, as they sat in the darkness of space, that arrogance felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the creeping realization that they might have made a grave mistake. Suddenly, the view screen flickered again, snapping the crew's attention back to the empty space. For a brief moment, a small ripple of distortion danced across the stars, a slight shimmer that was too subtle to be a typical spatial anomaly. The helmsman's hand froze over the console. He didn't dare move. Did anyone else see that? The first officer asked. The commander's gaze was fixed on the screen. What do you mean? Look, the officer said, pointing toward the shimmer. That was there. And then it was gone. The commander's breath caught in his throat. That small ripple. It was almost imperceptible, but he saw it too. There was something, someone out there, something watching them, waiting. His instincts, honed over years of command, screamed at him to be cautious, to turn away, but he didn't, he couldn't. Send a signal, the commander ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart raced. Send a transmission to every ship in the fleet. I want them to be ready. If there's anything out there, we need to know. The transmission crackled to life, and the fleet's comms officer relayed the command to all ships. The message went out across the stars. Prepare for further action. Stay alert. Moments passed in silence, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines and the soft chatter of officers at their stations. The waiting was unbearable, each second stretching into eternity. The air on the bridge felt thick, charged with an energy that no one could explain. And then, without warning, it came. A surge of light, brighter than anything they had seen before, appeared. On the edge of the fleet's scanners. This time it wasn't a flash, it wasn't fleeting, it was constant, persistent, growing brighter with every passing second. What is that? The first officer hissed, eyes wide with shock. Is it Earth? No, the commander replied, his voice low and uncertain. It can't be. The light grew, expanding outward like a wave, washing over the fleet. The commander's stomach twisted as he realized the true nature of what they were seeing. This wasn't just a signal. This wasn't an attack. This was communication. Human communication. Open all channels, the commander barked, turning to the communications officer. Now! The officer scrambled, his hands shaking as he activated every frequency, every channel, hoping to make contact. The fleet waited, hearts pounding in their chests. They were about to make history, one way or another. And then, through the static, through the blinding light, a voice crackled to life. It wasn't alien. It wasn't the voice of a threat. It was human. Is anyone out there? The voice asked, faint but clear. Can anyone hear us? The commander's heart skipped a beat. It was a simple question, one that should have been insignificant. But in that moment, it felt like the weight of the universe was hanging on the answer. We hear you, the commander whispered, his voice cracking, and the response came. We've been waiting. The silence that followed was deafening. The commander's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. They had been waiting, but for what? What did this mean? What had they awakened? The fleet waited, the hum of their engines drowned out by the overwhelming noise in their minds. "Sir?" the first officer asked, his voice barely audible. The commander turned to him, his face pale. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. The transmission crackled again, the human voice now louder, clearer, but tinged with something else, something dark, an undercurrent of tension that gnawed at the edges of their understanding. "We are still here," the voice said, this time with more force. "We never left." The commander stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from the view screen. The light still blazed before them, an unearthly brilliance that should have been blinding, but now seemed strangely familiar, as if it belonged, as if it had always been part of the void. The silence in the command center felt suffocating, the hum of the engines a distant memory compared to the weight of the moment. A second transmission followed. This one was different, distorted by static, but still unmistakably human. You shouldn't have come." The words hung in the air, like a death sentence. The first officer, visibly shaken, turned to the commander. "What does this mean? How is this even possible? Earth was—" "I know," the commander interrupted, his voice sharp. He was struggling to maintain composure. Earth had been destroyed, or so they had thought. The Council had believed. They were dealing with an extinct species, ready to fall under their boot heel. They had underestimated the humans. And now they were facing something far worse than they could have imagined. The voice on the transmission crackled again, but this time it was not just a message. It was a command. "Stop. Stay where you are. If you dare move, you will wish you had not." The fleet's officers exchanged nervous glances, the air thick with unease. The lights flickered, a sign of something far beyond the ship's control. The commander's pulse quickened. There was an undeniable energy in the space around them, an oppressive weight that seemed to draw them closer to an inevitable truth. This wasn't just about the humans. This wasn't about a planet or a species. This was something else entirely. And they had walked right into it. "Sir," the comms officer spoke up, her voice tight with anxiety, "we've tried everything. No reply to our further transmissions. It's like they're waiting for us," the commander finished, his words a grim reflection of the truth he had come to realize. The light before them began to pulse, and for a moment the space around them seemed to shift. The stars, once so steady and unyielding, flickered, wavered like an illusion. The commander felt it, a shift in the fabric of space. The tension was unbearable, the unknown pressing down on them like an invisible weight. Then, as quickly as it had come, the light faded. But it didn't disappear. It hung there, lingering in the distance like a warning. The silence returned, but it was different this time. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was waiting, watching. "We should leave," the first officer said, his voice barely a whisper. "We should leave now before what?" The commander didn't know, but the knot in his stomach twisted tighter. This was no ordinary warning. This was something far deeper, a message from a species whose silence had never been so loud. They had waited, they had watched, and now they were being forced to face the consequences of their arrogance. "No," the commander said, his voice steady but resolute. "We stay, we finish what we started. If they want us to leave, they'll have to make us." He turned to the officer in charge of the fleet's weapons. "Prepare to fire on my command." The officer nodded, though his hesitation was palpable. The crew felt the weight of their leader's decision, but deep down, they all knew it was too late to back out now. "They'll regret underestimating us," the commander muttered under his breath, though the words felt hollow even as they left his mouth. The silence stretched on, hanging like a thick fog, pressing against the walls of the command center. The commander stood at the helm, hands clenched into fists, his jaw set with determination. He could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him, the weight of the fleet's expectation. There was no turning back now. They had crossed a threshold, and there would be no retreat. Not after everything. "Commander," the first officer said softly, a note of caution in his voice. "The fleet, they're waiting for your order." The commander didn't reply immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the empty space in front of them, where Earth had once been, where that unsettling light had flickered and vanished. His mind raced, though it was clouded with confusion and doubt. The humans had sent them a message, something that at first seemed like a simple warning, but now it felt like a countdown, a timer ticking down to something irreversible. "To Sarcastic, you sure about this?" the first officer pressed, stepping closer. "We've seen no other signs of life, no weapons, nothing that could threaten us." "I'm sure," the commander said, his voice firm. "They're out there, and they're waiting for us to make the first move. They want us to act, but they don't know what we're capable of." The fleet's weapon systems hummed to life, their deadly efficiency a sharp reminder of the Empire's dominance. The weapons were primed, charged, ready to strike. It was time to show the galaxy that Earth had made a grave mistake by simply disappearing. "Fire!" the commander commanded, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the bridge. The fleet unleashed a volley of energy blasts, each one aimed at the empty space where Earth had once stood. The lights of the warships illuminated the void as the beams of destruction hurtled toward their target. And then the impossible happened. Just as the blasts were about to reach their target, the space around them seemed to warp and twist. The light from the blast scattered, absorbed into the void as if the fabric of space itself had rejected them. The ships shuddered, their systems groaning, as if something was pressing against them. The commander's heart pounded in his chest. "What the hell?" he spat, his eyes wide with disbelief. The energy beams, his fleet's most powerful weapons, were vanishing into thin air, but before anyone could react, it happened. The light returned brighter and more intense than before. The fleet's weapon systems flickered, their power siphoned by an unknown force. The commander's hand gripped the armrest of his chair as the full weight of what was happening hit him. "They've been waiting for us to make this move," the first officer whispered. "They knew we would come." The light grew, spreading out like a wave, washing over the fleet, the stars, the very fabric of space. The commander's vision blurred, the edges of reality seeming to fray and unravel. He felt as if he was falling, not through space, but through time itself. His mind was overwhelmed by the presence, by the intelligence that now filled the void. "Prepare for the inevitable," a voice echoed through the ship, resonating deep within their bones. It was not a voice from the human transmission. It was something else. Something ancient, something that was not bound by the same rules as them. A second later, the fleet's sensors screamed a warning. A sudden shift in the fabric of space. Something massive, something incomprehensible was approaching. The commander's breath hitched in his throat. "Brace for impact," he commanded, though his voice sounded hollow. No one moved. They were all paralyzed by the sheer scale of what was unfolding before them. The first officer's eyes widened in horror as the ship's systems overloaded, the consoles flashing in frantic bursts of light. The energy that had engulfed them was no longer just a light. It was alive, and it was consuming them. The commander watched as the edge of the fleet's weapons began to flicker, power draining away, their lights dimming one by one. "Sir," the comms officer gasped. There's no way to fight this. The it's too much." The commander's mind raced, but there was nothing left to do. No escape, no defense. Earth's silence had been a warning, and they had ignored it. What they had unleashed wasn't just a species. They had awoken something older, something far beyond their comprehension. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The light disappeared. The energy waves receded. The stars returned, but their light seemed distant, muted, as if they were no longer the same stars. In the empty silence that followed, a new transmission crackled through the comms. It wasn't human this time. It was something else, something vast, ancient, and beyond anything the Empire could understand. We are the gatekeepers of this realm. You were warned. Now, you will be remembered. The voice was not cruel. It was calm, detached, as if this had always been the way of things. The commander, shaking, looked out into the void where Earth had once stood. The fleet was in ruins, their ships scattered, damaged beyond repair. The energy they had tried to unleash had turned on them, leaving them broken, powerless. In the distance he saw it, a single, solitary light. It was Earth. Not destroyed, not gone, but changed. The humans hadn't vanished, they had transcended. And the commander realized, too late, that they had never truly understood the meaning of silence. Earth hadn't surrendered. They had simply been waiting, watching, waiting for the Empire to make its move, waiting for them to think they had won. They thought it was mercy, the commander muttered, his voice barely audible. It wasn't. But in the end, it wasn't the humans who had won. It was something far older, far wiser, something that had allowed them to watch, to wait, to make their move when the time was right. The fleet was broken, scattered, and the Empire's arrogance was a thing of the past. The galaxy had been changed, and Earth's silence had been the key to it all.